Welcome to Dream Cloud Millennial Tech. This is the next video in the Millie Mini AI Bot course. In the previous video, we went over these two different files. So this is the first version I've already made. That would be the orange robot there. And then the blue version, which is slightly different, that would be the blue version there. And we went over how FreeCAD works, how to download it, how you go from these kind of massive extrusions or kind of like, very basic objects into these more refined parts. But all of these exist as different bodies. So these are the 3D printable objects that you essentially will export later. So that's essentially what we're doing. We went over this one, we went over that one. Now we're gonna start a brand new one from scratch. So this is like every other program, right? Open recent. Those are our guys. Close, save, yada, yada, yada. We're gonna go to new, and this is unnamed, right? So the first thing we're gonna do is either right click it. Oh no, you can't rename this. What you have to do is save it. So just hit save or Control S, like every other program. And then what we're gonna do is find a good folder. So I keep everything in FreeCAD on my desktop so I can get to it. Millie Bot, this is actually the big robot. These are all the different files we created for that. Millie Mini, because we had the first iteration there, we had the second iteration there, and now we're gonna start the third iteration. So that's how I kind of organize this. This is just a folder. So I open up this folder, it's empty. And then all we're gonna do is call it Millie Mini, so that when you find this CAD file, right? So you can open it on FreeCAD, it'll just be Millie Mini, and that'll be the main one. And then if we need to, I guess I'll have to save different versions. So that's how you start a new project, right? And now every time we save, it's just gonna save to Millie Mini, which is in that Robot 3 folder. So we have the front. This is the navigation thing. You can do the corner, you can do the top, but you don't have any reference points to see. It's actually spinning the camera. This controls the camera. This is where your model lives. This is where the file is. And then under the file, you're gonna create a body, and then that's where all your bodies are created. So you just have to create a new body to do the next component of the robot, right? So right now we have Millie Mini. The first thing we have to do is just start by creating a body, right? We have an empty file. First thing we do is click that. Okay, now what does that do? That starts us creating our first three-dimensional object, right? That's why this thing body has a little three-dimensional object right here. All of these little things have icons that kind of help you figure out what they are, okay? So this body right here, there's the origin, right? It also puts our origin at 0, 0 right now. So we can kind of revisit this thing, right? You're gonna use your center mouse button to spin things around, or you're going to hold shift and use that center mouse button to move things around like that. So you're kind of orbiting things and shifting things. But this is good because sometimes you just want to snap it back to the front, the corner, right? So what we're going to do is create a drawing, right? So if you don't see what you need over here, right? I don't want to create another body. You can always just click on these things to bring these up. So when we're in that body, then we can create a sketch, right? And we don't need that origin visible. So let's create a sketch, right? So basically, we have to create a first sketch in order to create a body, right? And then once we create a body, then we create a sketch on top of one of those faces to increase it or decrease it or do something, right? So this is just the same thing, right? This is the origin. And basically this gives us the option to start in a particular direction. So what I want to do is I'm going to start by drawing the base, right, on the bottom plane, and then I'm going to extrude up, right? So I'm going to start, what I'm going to do is draw from the top down, and that's your XY plane. So that's this right here. So as soon as you click that XY plane, then it snaps, right? And what does this mean? Well, we're over the top of it, right? If I click that, you can see that this is kind of like almost flat, right? We're on, if we go to the front.
Hey Millennial Bot, it's 4 p.m. Time to feed the robot. Don't forget, make it tasty. Hey Millennial Bot, it's 4 p.m. Time to feed the robot. Don't forget, make it tasty.
All right, these bots are going to go off periodically. That's what they do. They're AI scheduled alerts. They're going to go off. That's what they're meant to do. So, the front is actually showing you just this guy, right? The right side. You get it, but it's just important to realize like some of these things aren't as obvious to people, right? But what we're doing is we're going to be over the top, right? And I want to use this center point. To me, this center point gives you a lot of flexibility because essentially we're creating something that is symmetrical. And in very rare cases, we're going to create something that's off center. And for that, we just draw it and then we define how far that thing is off center. But for now, we're just going to be using this center point as a reference. So we're in a sketch right now. You can see up right here, it shows us that we're in the sketch. We're in the sketch, right? This is, it's an empty sketch. So we need to fill this with an initial sketch. So what I'm going to do is define the basic shape of this right now. So what we do is we go up here to the drawing tools, and the first thing we need to understand up here is that all of these white ones are real lines that will make real objects. So we make a bunch of lines and then we close that drawing, and then when we extrude or we pocket, when we pad, making volume, or pocket, meaning like erase things or make a hole or carve things away, all of those lines that we created will be affected. So you don't have the choice of like making a drawing and then selecting that line, and you just need to create all the lines that you want to be padded and then hit pad, and then it does them all. So what if we wanted to draw lines that were guidelines? What if we wanted to draw lines that were kind of reference lines that we could create a grid, and then on that grid we could make holes? But we don't want the grid to be shown. Well, that would be this guy. So that is changed to blue. And now we have all these blue lines that we can create grids with. We can create center points. We can create reference points. We can create reference circles if we want to put a bunch of points on a circle or on a square or any other thing, right? In the midpoint of a line. So our first shape is going to determine the overall composition of this. So if I go into here, we're almost going to copy this completely. So I'm going to show how I started this one, the lower ring, the lower cube, and that first pad. This first pad is actually how we started the entire thing. So this first right here, lower cube, origin, pad, sketch, is the same thing we're doing right here. That we called that the lower cube, and then the pad will come after this sketch is closed. But if we look at this right here and go into this main sketch, this was the first sketch, see? And then this is what we did, 220 millimeters. All of this is in millimeters. Oh, please. Okay, I won't move any lines. 220 millimeters, and then it had a 15 millimeter radius, which I think is pretty good. We're gonna keep that. So we'll keep the 15 millimeter. That's kind of what I wanted to look for. So you can use your old models as references. So let's go ahead and turn that back on and get out of here. So 220, 220, and 15, right? That's kind of the overall dimension. So what we're gonna do is reopen this sketch because we got exited out of it when we did something over there. And if you do get closed out of the sketch, right, all you have to do is double click on it, and then that opens the sketch, right? So what do we want to do? We want to create a real line, a real object, and it's going to be a square, but I'm not going to do a square and then make a pad and then fillet those edges. I'm just going to make a rounded rectangle and save us some trouble. Now, the first thing it does is it snaps to this guy over here, right? I can do it along that line, right? And I can do it like that. And then I define the radius like that, right? And because that was kind of born on there, then it actually is kind of conditional, to that point. So it's only really just kind of sticking to this one axis, and then it's got all these other degrees of freedom. Essentially, we want to do the same thing, but instead of starting it on the corner, which is how this works, we want to go over here and we want to select the center, the width, and the height. So this one is the corner, width, and height. That's the default. I like to go with the center, width, and height, and I'll show you why. But basically, if you hover over here, it's going to kind of select that line. See how it goes blue? Or select that line. And that just means you're on that line. But if you want to be the center, then it's going to be the X. So now we're at the center of this entire drawing, and we're going to go, we're going to do the dimensions. So you can see down, I can't show you with the cursor, but you can see on the lower dimension that it's waiting for something, but we can also type it in. So you can click or you can type. So what I'm going to do is just 200 millimeters and 200 millimeters, and then it says, okay, that's the square. What's the radius, right? Because this is a rounded rectangle. And then that last dimension is just going to be 15. And that's it. So essentially, we've created the first shape. And I'm going to pull these out here so you can see them. But if you look at this, it's really simple, right? We created that first body, and then we created a sketch, and that first sketch is on the XY plane. We're looking at it from the top, right? It's fully constrained. What does that mean? Well, that means that you can't move it. There's no way can I click on this thing and move it and try to drag it. It's fully constrained. But that constraint is only that the center of it is at the center point of this. And it's got dimensions, and it's got a radius. So that's all that fully constrained means. When we get into more complex shapes, I'll show you how that can be a little fussy. But essentially, it's going to tell you all the different elements of this shape. And if you really get into customizing things, you can do it here. I don't touch any of these. I don't really fuss with any of these. I just draw the shapes, right? So that's that. It's fully constrained. Now that sketch is done, right? Because all we want this to do is to extrude a pad. So we're going to hit close, and then we're going to see that we're back out here, and we're back in 3D, but it's showing the sketch, which we can just turn on and off right there, right? But it wants us to see it. So this is our first pad that we're going to create right now. So we select the sketch, right? And then that opens up here, our modeling tools, right? So if we had something to subtract from, we would be making a pocket, which would be a hole for some reason, or some kind of a cut. But right now we're just going to create a pad. So a pad is how you go from a drawing to a three-dimensional object. Now, as soon as I click that, it's just going to give it a default length, but in this situation, it's the height, or how much is that drawing extruded. That's basically the length right here. And then the type is the dimension. And then we could do symmetrical to plane. So if I look at a couple of these things and I do symmetrical to plane, it's going to move it down, and it's going to extrude it 5 millimeters up and 5 millimeters down, right? Or we could do reversed, and it could be extruding down instead of extruding up. So there's a couple different options here, but most of the time you're just going to do a regular pad in one direction. But on the off chance that you're drawing on the top surface and you're actually wanting to extrude down, you just have to click reversed. And if you're starting somewhere and you're creating a drawing, but you actually want that thing to be centered where that drawing is and go in both directions, that would be symmetric to plane. So those are all the different options there. For this one, what we're going to do to try to, no, we need this to be 10. So I'm just trying to figure out, because I'm designing this from scratch as well. We need this to be 10, so that's okay. And then we have our first initial pad, and then we can kind of have fun with it. So I wanted to make this, you know, the overall shape of the widest dimension. And then the next thing we're going to do is actually create a sketch on the bottom that's going to go down 5 millimeters, right? So before we do that, let's just go ahead and hit save, or come up here and just click save. Control S is the shortcut keys. So we have our pad, but what I want to do is change the appearance of this body, right? So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go down to the appearance. I'm going to go over here to custom appearance. I'm going to click on this, and then I'm just going to change the material ambient color to orange. And this is what I've been doing for all the models besides the blue one. For the blue one, I think we just selected that. So it's the same thing. And then all you have to do is the diffuse and the ambient, change those two, right? That's good enough, right? Looks like that. The other thing you want to do, so you can see through it, is increase the transparency over here to something like 50. So all you have to do is come over on this side of the graph and just click it. So I guess you do have to keep it selected, and then you can turn this down, up or down. But you click it 5 times and it goes to 50, or you can grab this bar and change it, or you can use these, or you can just type it in, right? So that's done, close. What do we have? We have our first pad, we have it color coded, we have it transparent so we can see through it, which is going to be helpful when we're making holes, right? And then we can create our second drawing, which will lead to our second pad, right? And then what we also should do is just rename this. So click on this, right click on it, and then go down here to rename. And this will just give us a text field, and we can call this lower cube, right? So that's going to be the lower cube of the body. Or actually, what we should really call this is the lower shelf, because we're not making cubes anymore. We're going to make a lower shelf, and then we're going to make the lower columns, and then we're going to make a middle shelf, and then we're going to make upper columns, and then we're going to make upper shelf, and then top shelf, and then we could say the foot shelf or something like that, or bottom shelf, we'll make it. So we'll do all that later. But what we want to do next is basically create a sketch on the bottom surface of this. We just need to think about this as a surface that we can click on. And then we have the face tools, right? So we've clicked on a face, which brings up the face tools. If we're not clicked on the face, we don't have face tools. So click on the face that you want to impact, and make sure that it's the right one. So this is on the bottom. You can see we're looking from the bottom. We're not looking from the top. And then we're going to create a sketch. So what did that do? Well, that just allowed us to expand on this first pad or cut away from this pad, right? Because the system doesn't know whether this sketch is going to turn out to be a pocket or a pad, but it's essentially letting us draw on this surface, right? So just think about that as you've got these 3D objects, which are these you know, right here, these bodies that we created. And then on those bodies, you have surfaces. And then on those surfaces, you can create sketches. And then those sketches, when you pad or pocket, will change the form of that body from drawing on the surface of that body, right? Like if I had a phone and I wanted to create a hole in the phone, I would need to tell it which surface I want to create the hole from, and then I could draw a hole on the phone, and then I could use a pocket to make a hole in it. So that's basically all we're doing, right? Now we're underneath this, and we want to do the same thing we did before. Again, this is very repetitive. We created a sketch. Now we're going to go up here. We're going to choose the rounded rectangle. We're going to choose center, right? This step over here. And then we're going to start doing this. We're going to click, and then that's going to open this up. Now, where do we want this, right? We have to decide where this inner lip is. And for reference, we can use this. So what we're doing now is we've created this pad or this part of it. Now what we're going to do is create this part, which is this kind of like shelf extrusion, right? We're just going to extrude. We're literally just like building this extrusion right here. And what that allows us to do is to put this ring around the outside, right? Which gives us a nice little detail so that these pads, when they come together, right? As you can see on something like this, right? You got that nice little strip that's actually hiding the seam. And then it's also adding a little bit of volume so that you can screw inside of it. But it's only 5. So it's this whole thing, this white strip is 10 millimeters. So this little pad goes in 5, and then the other one also goes in 5, and then they seamlessly fit together. But that is essentially how we made this whole thing seamless. So even if we have screws that are just going through the bottom and they're being bolted into this top plastic, there's a middle section here that essentially allows us to hide that seam. So you don't see where the two pieces come together. And that's kind of, you know, just something that you have to think about when you're creating parts in general. But I don't know exactly where I want this. So let's just presume that what we're doing is we're going to push this thing in 10 millimeters on either side. So 20 altogether, and then 10 millimeters inside, and then 10 millimeters. So we started with 200 millimeters, and we need to subtract 20 from each side. So that's 180 and 180. And then we essentially want to keep this, I think, roughly the same. We have to kind of come in here and eyeball this, but maybe 10 is a suitable number. So what I like to do, and you can see that this is fully constrained now, what I like to do is kind of compare these things, and I actually think that's really chill. So this drawing is done, right? That's all we need to do. We're just going to create a pad that comes out of the bottom that allows us to fill in that, put in that white ring, and then make the next object. So we don't want to overcomplicate it. We just want to create one simple task at a time. It's fully constrained because we made it from the center. It's locked on. You don't have to find the corners. Everything's just going to be locked onto the center unless it's not. And for those special cases, I'll show you how that's done. So then what do we have? Well, if we're going to look at this from the top, you can see that that sketch is underneath, right? We drew that on the bottom of the pad, of the first pad. Now that also means that we drew it on the surface. So when we go to pad it, it's going to pop off that surface, right? Not everything is going to go up. What you have to realize is that when this pad is created, right? If we click pad, it actually comes out of the drawing based on where the surface was. So if we drew it on this side and then we hit pad, it would come out from that surface, right? So that surface is basically kind of becomes the new, I don't know, not origin, but it's just a reference. It's a reference plane that then you're drawing based on. So if you want to go down, you click on the bottom, and as soon as you hit pad, it knows. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but if we hit reversed, then that object goes up inside because we're telling it we don't want to do, we don't want to draw that pad off of the surface. We want to do reversed, but then they would just be hidden inside the object, right? The other option is we do a pad or a pocket, and then it would have subtracted this from the actual object. But we didn't do that. The only thing we need to change on here is just make this 5. So before it was 10, and now it's going to be 5. We hit OK. You can see how it subtracted, it's half of the distance here. So if we look at this from the front, we can say that this is 10, this is 5, and because we're going to make another 5 on the bottom here, that's going to go downward for the next body, then we'll have a nice 10 millimeter space, and then we'll make that ring later. So before we move on, I just want to quickly check this guy to see how we did that. So if we go to the lower cube, which is basically the lower shelf on our model, we can look at this pad right here, and we can see that this pad, let me just turn these things off, right? So this is exactly how we started before, but it was 220, and then I want to see what this was. So it was 20 minus, right? So it was 220 and 200, and then this guy over here is 10. So we basically did the same thing, which is great. Because it's just intuitive, right? Kind of, some of these designs are just intuitive. So what I just checked was the overall length and width of that smaller pad that we created on the bottom, was that just 20 millimeters smaller than the bigger one? And was the radius just changed from 15 to 10? And it was. So now we have the same thing, identical piece, but instead of it being 220, because it's kind of a little too big, we just made it 200. I just wanted to make it a little more sleek. And 170, which is what this orange one is just too tight, and the thing kind of topples over, and we don't want that. So 200 millimeters is nice. It's a nice clean number. It's not too big. We're going to be 3D printing these, but because we're going to be 3D printing these as pads and columns now, instead of these kind of all-in-one cubes, we're going to decrease the total print time. You want to make sure that when you're modeling things, you're thinking about the time that it's going to take to print it. And I think that this is something that, totally would have been great to kind of talk about before I started building Millie Bot, because this robot took, some of these prints were 30 hours, and that's ridiculous. I should have engineered it to be printable in, 7 hours, 8 hours, and just done one part at a time. Maybe a 12-hour session, but you really don't want to push the printers over that time period, because if something breaks and you're in on a 24-hour print, you've just wasted a whole day. It's not fun, and it's not, it doesn't help you keep moving. You want to be successful in all of your different, trials and errors here, and hopefully you only will mess up a couple prints and only waste a couple hours, but I've wasted entire days on this. So basically we have our kind of a ground plane, our essential, model here. So we're just going to have to build off of this, and I think the first thing we need to do is start with the next body down, and we'll just create another body. So what are we going to do now? Right now we have the lower shelf, right? But we want to create the bottom shelf. So before I go up, let's just go down really quick, and then I can show you how to do that. So I'm going to create a body. It's going to come in over here, right? Now, what I really want to do is I want to create a reference using this body, this initial body, so that I can create this body from that body, right? I don't want to create another random body in space. I actually want to create this body based on this form. right? Because it already has so many things. And I want to create it on that face. So how do I create something on that face without it being part of the same body? How does it become a new body? That's basically what we're solving. So the next thing we have to do is use this tool right up here. And I guess this is called a shape binder or a binder. But essentially what you want to do is make sure that this is double clicked, make sure that this is highlighted and the text is bold. It's kind of hard to see, but if you see it there, it's not bold, it's selected. But as soon as you double click it, then it's there. So this new body that we're creating needs to be selected. And then what we do, or double clicked, and then we just click that one time. So we're building in this body, but we've selected this body, just one click, and then we just tap that. And that is such a powerful move because that allows us to bring this body into this body as a reference, right? So now I can turn that off, lower shelf, that thing we just made is off, and now we have this binder. And that binder is default this yellow color, so you understand that this is not a real object. This is a reference object that's used from the last body that you created, or whatever reference object or body you need to reference. Yeah, this is a little fussy, but okay. So what we're doing is we're going to create a new object or a new body, but now we're going to create it off this binder, right? So what does that mean? Let's rename this first. And it's always just named body. So we go down here, rename, and this is going to be bottom. And I'm just going to call this a shelf, right? So the bottom shelf is under the lower shelf, obviously, right? So the bottom shelf is on this binder. So what are we going to do? Well, what this allows us to do is to create a sketch from scratch on top of another body without adding to that body, basically. So what we're going to do is select this surface. So this very bottom surface right here, right? That's selected. Binder, I got face tools because I've clicked on this bottom face. And then all we have to do is create a sketch. Same thing, right? Opens this up, now we're drawing. We're on the XY plane and you can see that that XY plane is on that surface, right? So that's all we did right now, is we're just gonna create a sketch on the bottom surface of this reference object, which is actually this object. So we can now create a new body. And what is that body? It's going to look the same. It's literally the same. It's in the opposite direction because this thing is just extruded. All of these things are going to be basically 200 by 200 with 15 radius, corners. And then if they're inside that, it's 180 by 180 with 10 degrees. So it's the same thing. So we're going to start here. We're going to make sure that we don't have corner width and height. We want center width and height. And then we're going to click here on the center. Make sure that snaps in. We can do whatever we want. We can make it huge like that. We just do 180, 180, and 10. Boom. Type it in, good to go. Fully locked in. All we had to do is click on the center point. All we had to do is tell it this rounded rectangle is going to be, we're going to start at the center point, and then we're just going to enter the dimensions. It's fully locked. We don't have to touch any of this stuff. You can drag these out if you want to look at them more, if you want to have a little more of a clean view. You can drag those out. You don't need to. And then that's it. Close it, right? Now what do? We have a drawing on the surface of the bottom of this reference object, which is called a binder. And all we have to do is now create a pad, right? So we're going to create a pad. So what is this pad doing? That pad took that drawing on the surface of that and just moved it in the direction of the surface, right? We knew we were drawing on that surface, so when we made a drawing, we pulled it out. And it just so happened to be the same size. And we don't need to touch the other drawing because we know that it's 180, 180, 10, right? The only thing we have to change again is 5 because we only want these middle ones. And also, it knows that we were just using that binder to start the object. So once we've drawn this pad, it automatically hides the binder, but you can just pull it back up again. But really what we want is that guy back. We want the real object, right? We want that real object to be shown. We don't want this binder to be shown anymore because it's yellow. It's not the real thing. It's just what we use to create this. So let's open this back up, lower shelf, right? The pad, right? This guy, and then we have that pad. So we're good. This bottom shelf, we never change the appearance. So if we go here, we have to do the same thing. Appearance, right here, custom appearance, boom. Change the ambient color, orange, okay. Diffuse color, orange, okay. And you don't have to do this. You can choose your own color. Bop, 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 bop. 50, close, done, right? Save it, Control save, make sure you're saving your work, and we're good, right? So now what do we have? Right now, we have this lower shelf, which is there, which is how we started it, and then we have the bottom shelf, and we can reorder these later because obviously I'm going to keep continuing to build them, but they're going to be higher up. So to get something like that, where it's actually all organized by top, upper, middle, lower, 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 feet, right? This, you're just going to drag and drop them later. So this guy is 5 as well. So you can see that this is where the seam is going to be between that guy and that guy, right? We're going to have a seam there. And that's why I created that little 10 millimeter strip. So we can put one of these guys in, right? Which is just another 3D printed part. And it's going to hide it. And it's going to add this clean little detail, right? And we know that they're bolted together, but we can't see that unless we look underneath. So all the bolts come from underneath, which is like a standard, design practice. So you can hide all the bolts underneath, and then the other circles that you see are actually for mounting. So what's the next thing we're going to do, right? We've got to keep going. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to create our next sketch on this pad, right? So the bottom shelf is that entire object, but we've created our first pad, which is just the fact that that's a 3-dimensional object now, right? Based on that sketch. And that's how you open the sketch. You just hit that. That's the sketch that was used to create the pad, right? Okay, so now we are good. What we want to do is we want to make sure we're here. That's the other thing. If you start clicking on these, it assumes that you're trying to modify that body. So you have to make sure that you're double clicked and this is bold, right? If you look at this right now is bold. What that means is that we're modifying the bottom shelf. We're not modifying the lower shelf. So even if you are clicking around on here, you need to make sure that this is selected for what you're editing at the time. So we got the bottom shelf, right? We select that and then we create sketch. Again, we're back in the same thing where we're creating a sketch on the surface, on the bottom surface here. And what we're doing is we're actually creating a mirror copy of this larger 200 by 200 with 15 radius corners. And make sure we have center. And then we click, make sure it clicks on the very middle. Cool. So we're doing the same thing, 200, 200, 15, boom. All right. So now we're done with that. And you'll notice it's hanging out here. That doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be inside of the object. It doesn't need to be smaller than the object, because what it's doing is it's saying that face is no longer like the end. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be building out from that face. But if we need to build something that's larger than that face, you'll see it just does the math for you. So basically that's it. It's fully constrained. We're good to go. It's all green, checks out. We hit close. Now what we have is this floating drawing that's on the face, right? Like it's on the face plane, even if it's not touching the face. And then all we're gonna do is hit pad, and it's gonna know, automatically defaults to 10, and that's what we want, right? So if we didn't want that, we could do symmetrical to plane, which would erase that 5, or if we did reversed, it would cover it completely. So that's not what we want. We want 10, we want dimensional, everything's good. Okay, done, right? So now we have essentially both the start of the shelf, which we can build up from, and then we have the bottom shelf, which is just going to be the bottom of the robot, right? So the next thing we're going to be doing for this is creating another sketch, right? So let's do that now. Let's create a sketch on the bottom of this. So again, we do the same thing. We create a sketch. We make sure that we make sure that this is bold, that we're in the bottom shelf, and we make sure that we select that face, which brings up the face tools, and then we create a sketch. Now, what is this sketch? This sketch, my friends, and I guess I could show you on, no, I'll show you on this. This sketch is going to be this extruded part. So if you look right here, this lip right here is extruded, right? This whole kind of like vertical dimension right here, we need to create that. We need to go from the pad we have now to the pad we want, but it's got to be hollow in the middle. So you can do that in two types of ways. You can extrude the whole thing. So what I could have done is I could have extruded this the whole distance, and then I could have turned around and created a pocket and shrunk it. But that requires you to change two different things, right? So if you wanted to change that distance, you would have to change, where it's extruded and then where you pocket it again. So to avoid that confusion, we're just going to create the next shape. So make sure you're on the bottom, right? Go in here, select the rounded rectangle tool. Again, we're going to use the center point because it's old reliable center point. Now, the outer edge of this pad that's going to be kind of an extrusion is just going to be the same shape. So it's going to be 200, 215, right? That's good. That's, if we left it at that, it would just make another pad exactly the same. But what we can do is we can draw another shape inside of that, and we can use that as a limiting, almost like a limiter, so that it's smart. The computer is automatically going to do this, but if you draw a square inside of another square, instead of creating the outer square, it actually creates the space in between the squares, right? So what we're going to do for that, 180, 180, right? And then what is this? 10. Yeah. So we use the same dimensions as the pad, as the little pad, right? We use the same dimensions so they line up, but now we're going to extrude this downwards. So essentially this is going to become a pad, but it's going to, instead of filling in all of this, it's going to automatically know, because of the software, right? We don't have to tell it. It's going to automatically know that what we actually want is this space in between the drawings. So it's going to create a pad out of everything from inside the outer drawing and outside the inner drawing. And it's kind of hard to make sense of that, but that's basically what you need to do, right? So anytime you draw a drawing inside of another drawing, just know that the space in between is actually what's going to be, that's what is going to create the pad. So we hit close, and you can kind of see, if we turn that off, that we have this sketch here, right? And then if we click off of it, we just have to click back on to get the modeling tools from the sketch. We're just going to create a pad. It's a regular pad, right? It's just like every other pad we did, but this one is kind of unique, right? It's not just a pad, it's a pad that's just the rim almost, right? So what I think we need here is just going to be 30. I'm pretty sure that's the dimension. And then I'm going to hit go. And then I'm going to come over here. And it looks like I'm wrong. It looks like that might have been a little more. So let me go into the feet cube, which is the bottom shelf. I'm going to look at this guy right here. That's the, yep, that's the pad. And then I'm going to look at the, oh, I'm just going to double click it, right? And it says 40. So basically, no, it's not 30. It needs to be extruded 40. But that's why this is a great reference model, because I can just come in here and see what I did before, and I don't have to guess, or I don't have to, you know, I lied. This is not robot number 2 or robot 3. This is robot 4, because we already made this guy back here, which is just a complete waste of time. But that was our first one. So now we're actually on the 4th iteration. So it does take time, and you know, you have to 3D print these things to look at them in the real world, because for sure I thought the first one was great, and then as soon as I printed it, I was like, no, that's not great. And then the same thing happened with this one, same thing happened with this one. So hopefully we like what we're making right now, because, or you know, we can remodel it, right? That's the great part about 3D printing, is you can print one and then you can remodel. So we wanted that to be 40, and it is now. So we're good with that. And that's basically how we did that. So I am going to stop here for this video. I think that kind of was long enough as a intro video to actually building. So we went over the project, we went over the courses, we went over what we're going to cover in this course. And then we went over the existing models. I showed you how FreeCAD works. I showed you how to download things. And I showed you how to create pads. And we haven't created any pockets yet. So that'll be in the next video. We're going to continue what we're doing here. And yeah, I'll see you in that video.